Picture this. The year is 1509. England is a rising power in Europe and a young charismatic man ascends to the throne. He is about to navigate the complex and tumultuous landscape of the early 16th century, a time marked by political intrigue, economic shifts, and social transformations. This is the backdrop against which our story unfolds, the stage set for the reign of Henry VIII. In the early 1500s, England was still finding its footing on the international stage. While it had begun to flex its muscles as a maritime power, it was yet to claim the global influence it would later wield. Its economy, though growing, was largely agrarian, with the wool trade proving particularly lucrative. Yet, the seeds of industrialism were already being sown, with the nascent textile industry hinting at the economic revolution that was to come. Politically, England was a fascinating mosaic of power, with the monarchy, nobility, and the church each vying for control. The monarchs in particular were starting to consolidate their power, slowly chipping away at the influence of the nobility and the church. This was a time of flux, a time of change, a time when the old order was being questioned and new ideas were taking root. Society was equally dynamic. The Renaissance was in full swing, bringing with it a thirst for knowledge and a hunger for change. Art, literature, science, and philosophy were flourishing, and the humanist ideals of the Renaissance were beginning to permeate society. The church, once the unchallenged authority on all matters spiritual and moral, was starting to face scrutiny, and the seeds of the Reformation were being planted. And amidst all this, a young charismatic man ascends to the throne. A man who would navigate these complex waters with an iron hand and a razor-sharp mind. A man who would shape England and, in turn, be shaped by it. This was the world that Henry VIII, the second king from the House of Tudor, was about to inherit. Aged just 18, Henry VIII was a breath of fresh air in the English monarchy. Envision a young man full of energy and ambition stepping into the shoes of his father, Henry VII. This was a time of hope and excitement, as the young king was known for his love of chivalry, sports, and the arts. Henry VIII was not just a king on the throne, but a king in the hearts of his people. His early years as king were marked by popularity and admiration. He was a charismatic figure with a larger-than-life personality that captivated his subjects. He was athletic, intelligent, and a true Renaissance man. His love for sports, especially jousting and hunting, was well known, and his keen interest in the arts made him a patron of musicians and artists. He was also a lover, not just of the arts, but of women. Early in his reign, he married Catherine of Aragon, the Spanish princess who was his older brother's widow. Their marriage was not just a political alliance, but also a love match, at least in the early years. Catherine was a devoted wife and a wise queen, who often served as regent during Henry's absences. But it wasn't all about sports, arts, and romance. Henry VIII was a serious king, who took his duties seriously. He was deeply involved in the governance of his kingdom, and he sought to strengthen England's position on the international stage. He was determined to make his mark, not just as a king, but as a leader and a visionary. But as we'll see, the charismatic and athletic king's reign would take a dramatic turn. The young king, so full of promise and potential, was about to face challenges that would not only define his reign, but also shape the course of English history. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the tumultuous reign of Henry VIII. Henry's reign took a drastic turn in the mid-1520s when he sought an annulment from his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Henry and Catherine had been married for over 20 years, but their union had not produced a surviving male heir. They had a daughter, Mary, but in the 16th century a female heir was not considered secure enough to ensure the continuation of the Tudor dynasty. Henry was desperate for a son, and he was beginning to believe that Catherine, now in her 40s and unlikely to conceive again, could not give him one. Henry's eyes had also started wandering, most notably to Anne Boleyn, a young and vivacious lady-in-waiting. Anne refused to become Henry's mistress and insisted on marriage. So Henry sought a way out of his marriage to Catherine. He pointed to a verse in the Bible that said a man who marries his brother's widow would be childless. Since Catherine had been married to Henry's older brother Arthur, Henry argued that their marriage was cursed. He petitioned Pope Clement VII for an annulment, but the Pope, under the influence of Catherine's nephew, Emperor Charles V of Spain, refused. The refusal put Henry in a difficult position. He was the King of England, Yet he was being denied his desire by a foreign power. It was a direct challenge to his authority and his personal desires. It also put England in a precarious position. The lack of a male heir could lead to a power vacuum and potential civil war upon Henry's death. Henry's decision to divorce Catherine and marry Anne Boleyn was not just a personal matter. It was a political decision with far-reaching consequences. It was the beginning of a power struggle between England and Rome, a struggle that would eventually lead to the English Reformation and the establishment of the Church of England. This decision would lead to a religious revolution that would change England forever. With the Pope refusing his request, Henry decided to take matters into his own hands. In the face of unyielding resistance from the Pope, Henry VIII, the charismatic and headstrong King of England, chose an unexpected route. He decided to break away from the Catholic Church, an institution that had been the cornerstone of European society for centuries. This was not a decision taken lightly, nor was it a spur-of-the-moment reaction. It was a calculated move, born out of necessity and ambition. The great matter of his annulment had become a thorn in his side. The Pope's refusal to grant him a divorce from Catherine of Aragon was standing in the way of his political plans and, more importantly, his pursuit of a male heir. Frustrated and desperate, Henry found a radical solution in the doctrine of royal supremacy. This declared that the king was the only supreme head on earth of the Church in England, effectively placing him above the Pope. To lay the groundwork for this unprecedented move, Henry began a campaign to discredit the Pope and the Catholic Church. He used his control over the English clergy and his influence over the Parliament to pass a series of laws known as the Acts of Supremacy. These laws were designed to undermine the Pope's authority and establish the Church of England, with Henry himself at its helm. What followed was a turbulent period of religious and political upheaval. Monasteries were dissolved, their wealth seized by the crown. Those who opposed the break with Rome were dealt with harshly, their opposition often costing them their lives. But despite the turmoil, the Church of England was firmly established, its roots entwining deeply into the fabric of English society. The break with Rome was a bold, controversial move that sent shockwaves across Europe. It was a decision that was as much about personal ambition as it was about political strategy. It was a testament to Henry's audacity, his willingness to defy convention and authority for what he believed was his divine right. Thus, Henry became the head of the Church of England, a move that defined his reign and legacy. Now, as the head of the Church, Henry was free to marry his mistress, Anne Boleyn. This second marriage of Henry's was both a political and personal gamble. Anne was a lady-in-waiting to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and her wit and charm had seduced the king. But Anne was not a queen to sit quietly in the shadows. She was clever and ambitious, using her influence over Henry to shape England's political landscape, and she bore him a daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth I. But Anne's failure to produce a male heir led to her downfall. Accused of adultery and treason, she was executed, marking a brutal end to their 3-year marriage. Henry's grief was short-lived, however, as he quickly married Jane Seymour, a lady-in-waiting to both Catherine and Anne. Jane was the polar opposite of Anne, gentle, submissive, and well-liked by the court. She finally gave Henry what he desperately wanted, a son, Edward. But tragically, Jane died days after Edward's birth, leaving Henry devastated. The king's fourth marriage to Anne of Cleves was purely a political alliance. Henry, however, found his German bride physically unappealing, and their marriage was never consummated. They divorced 6 months later, but Anne cleverly secured a generous settlement and remained in England as the king's beloved sister. Henry's fifth wife, Catherine Howard, was a teenage cousin of Anne Boleyn. Young and beautiful, Catherine caught the aging king's eye, but their marriage was short-lived. Accused of adultery, like her cousin Anne, Catherine met the same grim fate, execution. Finally, there was Catherine Parr, Henry's sixth and final wife. Twice widowed and in her 30s, Catherine Parr was mature, intelligent, and nurturing. She helped reconcile Henry with his two estranged daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, and acted as a stabilizing influence in his final years. She outlived Henry, who died in 1547, and went on to marry again, only to die in childbirth a year later. Through these marriages, Henry's personal life became inseparable from his political life. Each wife brought something different to Henry's reign, whether it was a political alliance, a longed-for heir, or a stabilizing influence. And each wife met a different fate, from execution to divorce to death in childbirth. But one thing is clear: Henry's quest for a male heir and his turbulent love life shaped his reign and England's history in ways that still echo today. Henry VIII's reign was full of dramatic changes and controversies. His rule, spanning nearly 4 decades in the 16th century, was marked by religious upheaval, political intrigue, and personal scandal. Yet, it's these very aspects that have made his legacy so enduring. Undeniably, one of the most significant aspects of Henry's reign was his break with the Catholic Church. This monumental decision, driven by a combination of personal desires and political aims, led to the creation of the Church of England. This move not only gave Henry the religious freedom he sought, but also set the stage for England's future as a Protestant nation. Henry's 6 marriages are another unforgettable aspect of his reign. Each marriage tells its own unique story, from Catherine of Aragon's enduring faith to Anne Boleyn's tragic end, from Jane Seymour's brief but cherished reign to the political marriages with Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr. These marriages not only shaped Henry's personal life, but also had profound implications for the political landscape of England. However, Henry's legacy goes beyond religion and his personal life. His reign saw the strengthening of royal authority and the centralization of power, which laid the groundwork for England's future as a major world power. His ambitious building projects, such as the renovation of Hampton Court Palace and the construction of St. James's Palace, reflect his grandeur and vision. Moreover, Henry's passion for arts and culture ushered in an era of Renaissance in England. His patronage of artists, musicians, and scholars contributed to a vibrant cultural scene that continues to inspire and captivate to this day. In conclusion, Henry VIII's reign was a transformative period in English history. His decisions, both personal and political, have had far-reaching implications, shaping the course of England's religious, political, and cultural trajectory. Love him or loathe him, there's no denying that Henry VIII left an indelible mark on English history.